Now we're talking all things connectivity and the importance of data center infrastructure when it comes to online gaming. With me, I have representatives from Khazna Data Centers, Akamai and Etisalat. Welcome along, guys. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
So if we could just start with a quick round of intros from everyone. Ziad, if you want to introduce yourself.
Ziad Samaha, I'm VP Business Development for Khazna Data Centers. I've been with the company for the past 3 years, and I've been working on Khazna expansion of portfolio as well as regional expansion and addition of data centers. Thank you, Chris, for having us.
That's great. And Miguel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Miguel Villalonga. I run the cloud and data center business in Etisalat, UAE. And I have been working in this space over the last 5 years. So have been very active in seeing the transformation of data centers from the traditional business environment to the new exciting cloud service provider landscape, where we see all the big players in the industry already in the UAE. And now more and more working alongside Khazna in developing the data center infrastructure in the country.
Okay, and Elie?
Yeah, my name is Elie Abouatme. I'm engagement manager at Akamai Technologies and also the managing director for the UAE office. I've been with Akamai for a bit over 5 years. I handle advisory services, and over the past 15, 16 years, I've worked at regional data centers, telco companies. So I've been around in the tech space. Thanks for having us.
Well, it's great to have you guys here and to have that wealth of experience from across the industry here at DGC. I'll just start really by asking you, Ziad, what you think in terms of having, regional data centers. How important would you say that is in terms of connectivity when it comes to gaming?
Well, it is very important. So basically, the gamers in general, they spend a lot of money on their gaming, let's say, own hardware. You can start with the decks to the comfortable chair to the noise cancelling earphones to the minimum 2 screens and the high performance PC that delivers to them some kind of real life gaming, and they feel embedded in the game. So when we're gonna move that gaming infrastructure from the end user and put it in a data center, we need to try to optimize the experience so that we don't take that feel from them. And the biggest challenge is basically the latency. And in simple terms, the best way to optimize the latency is to shorten the distance. And by shortening the distance, we bring the data center closer to the gamers. Hence, it is extremely important to have a data center close to the gamers. Of course, there are a lot of aspects. I'm not going to enter into the details of the gaming infrastructure and how it differs in a single user or a multi-user environment. But it is definitely extremely important to shorten the distance to make sure the latency is as low as possible. And on top of that, we need to make sure that not only we bring the data center, the infrastructure closer to the end user, we make sure that data center that hosts this infrastructure is actually capable. It's capable to support the infrastructure to deliver the experience to the gamers.
And I think you do make a good point there about latency and the connectivity issues there. And I think it's a good point. You don't want to invest all that money in the kind of gaming hardware, but then not have an optimized experience because you've got connectivity issues. Miguel, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I agreed with Ziad. I think latency is, at the end of the day, very important. But if we look at how the games are evolving, the games are becoming more and more interactive and more sophisticated, right? And now, let's if we talk about this Metaverse concept that everybody's talking about, right? This comes from the gaming world, where people can interact with each other. So at the end, it translates into 3 very, very important elements. One is the response of the game, and that requires compute capacity. And this is where the data centers become very, very important. The second element, which is very important as well, is the cross-device reality. So at the end of the day, all the cloud gaming is becoming very relevant because it enables you to play from any device. You can play at home on the set-top box on your big TV. You can play on your mobile device. You can play on your PC, on gaming consoles. and players expect to have interoperability. So you expect to start a game in a place and then continue somewhere else. So that interoperability and cross-device becomes very, very important. And again, all the infrastructure enablement is critical. And the third one is the capacity in terms of bandwidth, both locally and internationally. I mean, we're lucky enough that we live in a region, in a country that has 98, 99% coverage of fiber to home. Is the number one in the world in terms of fiber to home coverage. But then we also need to look at the backbones that connect all this fiber to the rest of the world, and the continued investments in capacity, in submarine cable capacity, to make sure that this huge demand grows. I mean, one example is when we started working in opening some of the cloud service providers, some of the hyperscalers regions in country, we were planning for them to use the cloud for business consumers. But the first projects that came blew all the expectations. And basically these initial use cases were gaming. And all of a sudden, the capacity that was planned had to be multiplied many-fold to be able to cope with all these tremendous requirements in terms of bandwidth as well as compute power. So yeah, I mean, latency translates into a significant challenge and a huge opportunity for all of us.
And just on that subject of the challenges, I'll go to you, Elie. What do you see as being some of the big challenges in this space?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a difference on the angle you want to tackle this from. If you're looking from the player experience side, you got certain challenges. If you're looking from the other side, game developers, you have different challenges, and then the infrastructure, all the build of the business owner themselves, it's a different challenge. I agree with what Ziad and Miguel have said. Obviously, latency is an issue. Compute power can be another challenge. But if maybe I'll look at the angle of the player experience side, when we talk to those guys, and Akamai has surveyed a good number of them, they are, as much as the business owners are interested in security, the players are interested in that as well. And they believe and they agree security should be a shared responsibility type of a model. So there are challenges that they need to take on themselves as players. And then there are what I call the businesses, basically the game developers, owners, the big engines. They have other challenges related to security that they need to address as well. I mean, you look at the gaming industry going, I don't know how much it's valued at today, probably over 200 billion or something. And then you consider, just like Miguel said, everything around technology is converging towards the metaverse. Take the Fortnite example, where we started seeing things that are not just gaming, right? So I think earlier this year or last year, they have even hosted a few concerts, and they were big successes. So you had gamers join that, not to play the game, just to watch their favorite artists, Ariana Grande, Travis Scott, and the others. So it's starting to move beyond the just a game thing. Who knows what it's going to host next as a platform? And one of the CEOs, I think, even mentioned Fortnite itself has become a social platform, not just a gaming platform. If you count the number of users, I think they have somewhere over 300 million active users there. I'm saying all this to just focus on the importance of the player's experience, since it's growing so much and needs to scale. And tied closely to experience is security. How do you protect those accounts? Because they tell us, and we know, they are worried about being hacked, losing their credentials and all that stuff, getting all over, the dark web and whatnot, and being leaked.
Chris, I would like to add as well, again, it's on the latency. As opposed to video streaming or music streaming, now that Elie touched point on the concerts that have been, streamed over a gaming platform. The games cannot be preloaded, because you cannot predict what's going to happen next in a game. Hence, it's very important to have very short latency, and having a localized data centers helps with that.
And so just to jump off the back of that big sort of buzzword that was mentioned by Miguel and Elie, the Metaverse, obviously it's a concept that we're featuring quite heavily in our conference this year. It's one of our core topics. I'll go to you, Ziad. How do you think the Metaverse is going to play a role in users' needs for data, and how is it changing the way you're strategizing going forward?
Basically, in general, in terms of data centers, the data center future plans are not only driven by the technology itself, on which the gaming had been developed and delivered, because by the end of the day, as an ex-colleague of mine used to say, the data centers and the connectivity, they form the fabric on which the infrastructure that delivers the applications is to be deployed. And frankly speaking, what is gaming? It's just a high demanding software as a service, right? It's really high demanding software as a service. So irrelevant if it's a metaverse or any other distributed or non-distributed infrastructure on which the gaming platform is to be delivered, the data center growth is in the direction of getting closer to the end users. So we like it or not. So we're going to be, like, for example, I'll give you a simple example. As Khazna, we're expanding in the UAE tremendously, and we recently joined ventures with Etisalat on the data center front. And we're looking at having 16 to 17 data center facilities in the UAE by 2023. In addition to that, we are looking to expand regionally. And as we develop our portfolio to getting closer to the end users, including gamers, we're going to be looking at edge data centers. So we're going to be looking at edge gaming as well. So regardless of the platform, being a metaverse, a distributed or non-distributed platform, the data center is expanding and it's getting closer and closer to the end users.
Miguel, you're obviously the one that mentioned the metaverse before. So how do you think it's going to affect the way you do things in the future?
Well, look, I think we all have to acknowledge that our ability to predict to what extent any event changes the world, especially related to technology, has been, probably short-sighted. It's very difficult, as Elie was saying, what's going to bring. It's very difficult to foresee, but probably it could bring new models which are going to be huge. And I think it's all generational as well. I have seen a lot of changes in my career now. I think that having to adopt the metaverse for me will be a challenge, but I have children who are and young teenagers who are native in this space. So definitely it will be much more than a game. It will be much more than a simple experience. It will be, as Elie was mentioning, it will be a social platform. You will do a lot of things there. Now, something very important of what Elie mentioned is that there's another aspect which has an effect in the localization of all these data centers, of all this infrastructure, which is security on one side. As Elie was mentioning, security is very important, but on the other side is also the regulatory piece of how security works, especially data privacy. Data privacy has been big in other regions. Now, last week, we saw the UAE launching its data privacy law. So if you think about it, as the games become more rich from a content point of view, and they become games plus, so games turn to be social platforms where you will be able to do pretty much everything. You will be able to today you're able to become whoever you want. You are able to buy avatars. You are able to buy goodies for the avatars. Tomorrow you will consume concerts. You will consume movies. You will transact. You will have a financial platform in the game with much more rich content, right? And that's the business model at the end of the day. But I think it's very important to understand that all that model will have to come with certain controls and regulations in terms of data privacy, security, that will affect the localization of those data centers. And therefore, having the local infrastructure becomes very relevant, whether it's competing on the edge, because boundaries will become important. So all these elements correlate. And I think that, as Ziad was saying, it's very important to have a fabric which is technically strong, but also that can take care of these considerations, of all the foundation that is required for all this whole industry to evolve.
And when it comes to infrastructure, Elie, how would you describe the current state of the infrastructure we have in the MENA region right now?
I'm not sure if I'm completely up to speed with the latest, but from what I know and my experience, I think the region has enough and is emerging. I would definitely say it's emerging. If you consider the cloud service providers, the big names we have around here, some of them have deployed in different locations. Others have announced more regions coming in. So this is obviously playing a big part. Then you have the local players, the likes of Khazna, Etisalat, going over different levels or layers of the stack, from infrastructure all the way out to providing the service, even as a software. I think Etisalat recently announced something on towards that front. I won't steal your light, Miguel. I think we have enough to empower the local developers, the community, those who want to build in the region. Of course, all that infrastructure cannot be siloed. Both Miguel and Ziad talked about latency. So you need that infrastructure to be connected. You need the digital highways to be opened. Definitely regulation to hopefully come before all that, and pave the way for it. So I think we're good, and I think the push we're getting from the governments in terms of local visions and where we want to be 10, 15 years from now is playing a big role. So the enablers are there. It is a good time to be thinking about gaming, whether you're a developer and if you just enjoy the games. I think what's ahead is a far better platform to use than the one you had over the past 15 years.
You raise a good point there as well. I think we've obviously been talking lots about the needs of gamers, but you mentioned developers. How do their needs factor in when it comes to everything you do? Do you sort of take their feedback on board? Do you work with them with the products you create, Elie?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We actually, so we follow where our customers need us to be, right? And no matter what industry you're in, you either became or you have to become a technology company first and foremost, and you have to enable a DevOps organization no matter what business you're in. And we recognize that, and we empower and protect those developers and their organizations as much as we can. And by that I mean, if you know Akamai, you know the business is split into two main pillars: the delivery side, where we do content delivery network, and the security side, where we are protecting all aspects of life online, basically. So recently we've decided to take this a step further by opening up, so to speak, all our hundreds of thousands of servers deployed around the world for developers, and put that compute in their hands, and allow them to write code and deploy it instantly across all these servers globally, so they can really build without having to worry too much about infrastructure or core data centers that are far from them. And the possibilities kind of become endless here, because what you can do in JavaScript or other code is pretty powerful these days. So nothing stops a mobile developer from writing a game in a couple of hours, deploying it across all the edges all around the world, and voila, it's up and running, and somebody can use it and running. So that's when we're looking at developers themselves from that perspective. But we also enable and empower companies that are and work in this space. So if we consider, I don't want to use names, but if you look at user-generated content for games, it's becoming huge these days. The pandemic also enabled it quite a lot, because people, especially teens and kids, were spending more time at home. And if you give them the platform, put it in their hands, yes, they will try to develop a few games and create whatever you can and post them online. So on that front, we're enabling the businesses that are making such platforms available. And by that, I mean, we're speeding them up. We're making sure they are reachable within acceptable latency, pages, applications load fast, and at the same time protecting them in terms of infrastructure and their users.
And one of the things Elie mentioned there was this sort of rise of UGC and content creation. Obviously, in the last sort of year and a half, there's been an increase in the demands for data. How do you see that kind of uptick affecting the way you do things? And are you kind of making these provisions for this big growth in people's needs when it comes to data, Ziad?
I will touch base on the data front of it. I will let someone else talk about the connectivity part of it. Basically, as Khazna, we are, as everyone knows, a carrier-neutral data centers, and our tenants are at the freedom to discuss their connectivity requirements with any of the licensed operators. But on the data front, we like to think that currently within our plans, we are building our expansions and we are thinking ahead. We are just building with massive demand inside. And we would like to say that we will be able to comfortably accommodate expansions and actually, adoption in the region of a lot of the gaming platforms. So all our expansions are taking into consideration a lot of aspects. One of them is the increased amount of data. Second one is the requirements from the high-performing infrastructures. So mainly speaking, a few years back, I think Miguel mentioned it briefly in the beginning. So a few years back, we were looking at data centers that can support rack density of 3 to 5 kilowatts. Today, we are looking at data center that can support like 20 kilowatt per rack. So our expansion, our data centers design and construction is all around what we're going to expect in terms of explosion in data and in compute, be it on the AI front or the cloud and gaming front.
And Miguel, off the back of that, as far as connectivity is concerned, how would you say that users' needs have changed in the last year or so?
Well, again, it's a matter of capacity. So, we're trying to make the whole mesh much stronger so that we can accommodate all the content that Elie was mentioning and connect all the data centers that he was mentioning. I mean, the fiber infrastructure of the country continues being developed, and we continue connecting all these new data center infrastructure that's being developed. The international portion is also in full speed. I mean, we continue investing in new subsea cable systems that connect us with the rest of the world. We increase our carrier dense facilities, so the facilities where different carriers come and interchange traffic. We have been working traditionally in our smart hub in Fujairah, where we have most of the cable landing stations landing there. We're opening a second node in Dubai, in one of our new data centers in Jebel Ali. So we're going to have a second carrier dense node there. And obviously, from a connectivity to the end user, that also continues growing. I mean, the home is connected with fiber, but now with edge data centers becoming more required by all these new applications that are coming online, and obviously the star of the last few months and for the next few years is going to be 5G. So 5G is enabling all sort of new devices, new end user devices with lower latency, higher density in terms of users in a geographical location, and significant higher bandwidth, low requirement for battery. So what we expect is that the type of use cases that will be enabled in gaming and in the extended use of gaming will be significant. So all this together looks like is getting to the point where the capacity will be more or less virtually unlimited. So the cost continues coming down, the capacity continues going up. So there is no excuse to have an impeccable end user experience, and for gaming, which is very, very critical. As an anecdote, I was speaking about my children when my 6-year-old kid was telling me about latency. I said, "What the hell do you know about latency?" I said, "Well, I need it for Fortnite." So yeah, this is how they really learn. And the truth is that more and more this infrastructure is ready to ensure an impeccable user experience. The market, the user base is growing, will continue growing. As I said earlier, the games become more and more sophisticated, and practically everything now is interactive gaming. So this latency requires capacity, which is being developed.
So we've obviously been discussing the way things are going and the way things are growing in the kind of regional markets. Ziad, you touched upon it a little bit before, but it would be great to get a bit of a sense of any other kind of plans you've got in this region.
There are a few I can mention and few that I cannot. I apologize. So, like for example, recently it's been announced that we're going to go into Indonesia, and Indonesia we're going to build 1,000 megawatts of data centers. We are working on plans to expand in Saudi, and we are currently looking at 2 sites, 2 locations. So we identified a plot already in Jeddah, and we're going to proceed with that. And as well as in Riyadh, we are now working on the setup of the legal, entity in Saudi, under which these data centers will be constructed. We are looking at Kuwait, we are looking at Egypt, we are looking at Bahrain. So we are planning extensive expansion within the region. Of course, the biggest expansion will remain within the UAE, where we are looking at 17 different locations.
Now, you mentioned Saudi there. Obviously, Saudi's Vision 2030 is a big topic of our conference, and we're looking at all the ways in which the country is optimizing itself to be a sort of gaming and technology superpower. What sort of prospects excite you there?
You can never disregard the Saudi market. If you're going to look at it from any perspective, being cloud service providers, gaming, artificial intelligence, anything that requires data centers, you can never disregard the Saudi market. The population and the demand and the end users are huge. So the importance of the Saudi eyeballs is of great significance to all service providers. Well, yes, the penetration of competition may be difficult, maybe not, because we will be considered as a new penetration to the market compared to the incumbents and to other existing data centers. But yet, I believe there is room for everyone to provide the access to businesses and to foreign businesses into Saudi by providing the infrastructure to support the deployment of their services. And it's such a gigantic market. I believe these 2 data centers will not be the end, just the beginning. I believe we will grow much beyond that.
And Elie, how about yourself as far as the region is concerned? What are some of the kind of key trends and prospects that you're most excited about?
Yeah, I can't comment either on any expansion plans for the company, but I can tell you for Saudi specifically, we're already quite present in that region. We have seen unprecedented capacity levels delivered into the region, and I believe we have stronger presence than from a CDN and cloud security service than any of our competitors in that region. We are in the major cities. We have hundreds of servers per city, and we continue to go where our customers want us to be. We cannot, like Ziad said, you can just not overlook Saudi. It is a digital hotspot, from mobile penetration to growth to visions to demographics to no matter how you strategize there, you have to address the Saudi market and give it its worth. And we at Akamai will continue to support our customers there and the communities. And we do that by leveraging our cloud delivery platform, which will do both the delivery of content, steering away from the congested peering points of the internet, and at the same time protecting the infrastructure, which is something we continue to do quite well. Actually, since I'm touching on attacks, there is one number that struck me that I thought it's interesting to bring up here. Web attacks we have seen targeting specifically the gaming industry were up 340% year on year between 2019 and 2020. This is Akamai research. For those interested, akamai.com/SOTI, state of the internet. You'll get those reports from there. 340%. And this is not always region specific. So it's gonna follow our region and where we are here. And those types of attacks need to be addressed here as well. We can talk more about those, but the more alarming ones we see and we think need to be addressed, and all companies should prepare for as this sector grows, are the credential stuffing, account takeover attacks, and phishing.
And so how do we go about protecting ourselves from some of those risks? And what is some of the research uncovered that's kind of guiding you in terms of the way you think that we should be preparing for these kind of eventualities?
Credential stuffing in its own, which is when someone tries to get a hold of some bulk username and password lists that they found online, which, by the way, in early 2020 were being sold for as low as $5 per million buckets, per million records as a bucket. So pretty cheap. These types of attacks can be leveraged by a suite of solutions. Akamai is leader in mitigating credential stuffing attacks. We have different solutions that actually identify and mitigate bots that are doing those attacks, or identifying some type of fraud that is happening on your infrastructure, web, or application space. But like I said earlier, it's also a shared responsibility model. So the users have to play a part as well. And it's all things we have heard and seen in the past, but you'd be surprised how not everybody practices the best practices. So, don't use a single password across all your accounts. As simple as that. Use a password manager. What else? I've seen a joke over the internet the other day that says when you use your password, when you choose a new password, put a semicolon in it, just to mess with the hackers when they put together those databases. Multi-factor authentication is a big one. Almost any platform has that as an accessible method of added security these days. Everybody should use it. Why not make it harder for hackers to get to you? But to summarize in the challenges and back to that report I mentioned from Akamai, yes, we see the biggest types of attacks on the gaming industries. Web attacks specifically have to do with local file inclusion for the techies out there, and SQL injection attacks. And the first one can really get into the configuration files of the game and mess with them. And the second one, where you're injecting into through the queries into a database, you can, by that method, if the protection around it is weak, you can through that method get access to usernames and passwords. And players tell us this is one thing they worry about the most.
And so how are Khazna and Akamai working together in the security space? Ziad, I don't know if you want to dive into that one.
Well, as Khazna, we just enable, we just enable the infrastructure for anyone who wishes to provide security services to be able to operate from any data center that we own and operate, be it in the UAE or outside of the UAE. But by the end of the day, that's all that we provide in terms of provision for security services. Because our security is basically purely physical rather than digital, but we provide the platform for those who can provide digital security.
And Miguel, obviously, we've talked to the other guys about some of the kind of exciting future projects they've got going on in their respective industries. What are some of the things that are on the horizon in the region for Etisalat?
Well, it's basically more of an anticipation based on discussions we keep having with the industry leaders, and because data center expansion is a never-ending project. And based on these discussions, we keep always anticipating future growth as we design further data centers, and we try to implement whatever lessons are learned or information that we receive from existing tenant or prospects into our future expansions. Ideally, we would like to be able to not only host them, we would like to be able to host all other service providers that enables them to provide services. So being the extension of internet exchanges for peering, being the possibility to host, content distributions like Akamai or any other provision for any service provider who will enable the platforms to be co-located in any data center, our data centers, basically in the UAE or outside of the UAE. So that's basically our approach.
Okay, and Miguel, in terms of, we kind of discussed a little bit about the sort of future potential that these guys are working on with their kind of respective companies. What are some of the big things on the horizon for you guys with Etisalat at the moment in this space? Any big projects you can discuss?
Well, on one side, we continue growing in capacity, as I mentioned earlier. On the other side, we continue exploring all our gaming offering. We recently launched the Elie cloud gaming service in the UAE, which has been quite interesting. As I said earlier, it's the cross-device enablement where you can play on your set-top box and you can cross-device and use basically gaming on the cloud. And because we have the different areas of our consumer entity, which is basically serving the end users, plus our infrastructure development, we try to combine all the different aspects to grow in this type of capabilities. When it comes to infrastructure, we try to cover all the different areas that we are discussing now. We have a unit which is recently announced to be carving out. It's going to be separated from the rest of Etisalat, called Etisalat Digital, which is going to take care of all digital services. We have a very strong cybersecurity arm. It's an acquisition we did recently of a company called Help AG that is basically taking care of all the aspects of cybersecurity, from infrastructure network all the way up to the application that secures all the digital infrastructure. We have a unit that's going to be taking care of IoT and edge computing and everything related to the new use cases and new protocols around IoT and edge that will again enable all use cases which are very much linked to gaming as well. And obviously the third one, which is my world, which is all the cloud infrastructure and all the capacity around that. So all these are the hottest topics. I mean, it's where the company is definitely looking at growing, but always keeping in a very clear, priority the preferences of the end users and the evolution of the industry in that regard.
And so you mentioned cloud gaming there. What are some of the exciting trends you're seeing in that space, and what sort of evolutions are you seeing there?
Well, I think, as I said, the ability to use cross devices and not being linked to one specific device is a big plus. The change in the subscription model, the change in the consumption model is something which is absolutely evident. We've seen it in music with the Spotifys of the world. We've seen it in video with Netflix and the like. And in gaming is here. I mean, at the end of the day, we are no longer asking users to buy a specific game. Normally they subscribe to different services, and then it's a way of making it easier for consumers and for gamers to have access to a broad array of different games in any device at any time, with a very, very flexible way of consumption. So we believe that that's definitely the trend. Esports are growing significantly as well. So all making it easier for end users to consume is definitely the way to go.
And how do you think this will tie in with the need for more data centers or more localized data centers?
Well, as I said earlier, it's all related to providing the capacity and the response time as efficient as possible. It's a game of latency, as Ziad was mentioning earlier. It's latency. At the end of the day, latency is achieved by having the right computing power at the right distance from a connectivity perspective. and having the right legal framework and data privacy framework around all these solutions. So as all these elements grow, I mean, we need more and more local capacity. So the data center development will have to continue growing locally, both in the larger data centers, which is what we are doing along with Khazna, as well as in transforming all the local infrastructure into edge infrastructure. So basically, when we look at it, I mean, as a telco in the UAE, we have 400, 500 buildings, which are our traditional exchanges. So the exchanges have been used for, local connectivity and having basically local mobile connectivity infrastructure as well. Now those different buildings are transforming into mini data center for edge computing. So all that is a continuous evolution of the technology to make sure that this mesh that we're creating can support all these new models that are coming up.
And as we're sort of wrapping up now, I'd like to just kind of ask each of you in your respective fields where you'd like to see the region as far as infrastructure goes in the next 5 years. Starting with you, Elie.
I mean, for us as Akamai, we just like to. I think we'd like to see this region evolve, and we'd like to play a role in that evolution whenever possible, because we are here. We are here as people, teams, infrastructure, and the company has shown support, continues to show support for the region. So the evolution that is to follow and take us out of an emerging market to become a more mature and evolved market. Maybe if you follow the trends of US down to Europe and then down to the Middle East, that path is there. We're all on it, and we're gonna end up there. We'd like to see the rest of the industry players continue to do just that. And Ziad and Miguel within their organizations are, from what I hear, obviously doing that, which is great. And it's just a success story in the making, and we're just excited to be part of it. If you also look at demographics, we're also happy to be enabling the people, right? We say at Akamai we make people's lives better, billions of people's lives better, billions of times a day, because of the sheer volume of traffic we see, we protect, and we deliver on our platforms. And we want to do the same for this region. We also want to enable the communities, gaming and developers of this region. And if you look at the demographics, I mean, we know the Middle East is a young population. We know the brain power is there. We know there are kids and teens who are eager to learn, and when you put these tools in their hands, and those are the future of the region by the end of the day. They are going to build the next Akamai, Etisalat, Digital, and Khazna, and so we're here to support existing businesses and the ones that are yet to come.
What about you, Ziad? What are your hopes for the future?
Well, basically, as much as I would like to say that, for example, we are providing the infrastructure that enables and paves the way for gaming infrastructure to be deployed within the region and expanded within the region, it's not as simple as I'm saying it. What I hope for is to see a strong cooperation between the gaming companies, the licensed telco operators, the content delivery, the distribution, and the data centers all together to be able to bring this into reality, of course, under the umbrella of the regulator within each company. Because if we don't see such a cooperation, it will be very difficult to make the region extremely attractive. In spite of the importance of the eyeballs in the region, it will be very difficult to make it attractive if we don't work all together and make it happen.
And finally, Miguel, how about yourself? What are your hopes and visions for the future?
No, I totally follow what Elie mentioned and what Ziad is mentioning. But I would say that, I mean, we're lucky to be in a region that is very keen to invest, that is very keen to collaborate. We are lucky to have a government that is very forward-looking and very business-oriented. So from my point of view, the infrastructure development is a given. We're doing it. The alignment from a regulation point of view will happen. Normally, regulators are slower by definition, but the vision is there and the principles are there, so it will happen as well. So for me, the most important element is definitely the development of talent, the development of an ecosystem of creators, of developers, of technical people, but also of people that can create content, that can attract the new generations, and can develop all the new models that will come from traditional gaming to new ways of sharing content, to the new metaverse. I mean, all that will require a significant amount of creation, a full ecosystem of content creators, of producers, of technical developers. That you know, the opportunity is huge. I think we have to always remember the theories of the exponential growth, that, you know, we have to look at any point in time that we've come a long way, but what we have ahead of us is going to be exponential. So the growth is going to be much more significant. So if we look at that, I think that the opportunity is huge. As Elie was mentioning, you know, the demographics of this region is unique. It's a young population, you know, with hunger for development. And all this space shows a tremendous opportunity. So I hope that, you know, as an industry, we're able to attract the talent and develop the human capital that is required.
Well, that's great. Lots of food for thought there, and really good to get the opinions and thoughts of all three of you. Lots of different kind of insight from different parts of the industry, and really good insight into how, you know, that optimal infrastructure is going to look going forward. And to all of our audience, thanks again for tuning in to this session at DGC. And don't forget, you can follow everything we're doing on our social channels.